my hammer. Good evening, everyone. I have 6 o'clock, so we'll start this meeting of the Common Council for Tuesday, March 8th of 2022. Looks like everyone's present except Mr. Handler, who is not joining us tonight, so please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item C is a public comment period. At this time, the council president will recognize members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the council president, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak tonight? Any members of the public? I'm going a third time. We'll move on to item D, approval of the minutes from the February 22nd, 2022 regular meeting. Motion by Mr. Fire. And a second by Mr. Varshall. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion carries. Item E is staff updates. First item is an introduction of new employee, Matthew Klug, by Pat Zeps, acting police chief. Pat.
All right, good evening. I'm here tonight to introduce our newest member of the Marshfield Police Department, Matt Klug. A little bit about Matt is he comes to us from Plymouth, Wisconsin, where he graduated from Plymouth High School in 2018. After that, he attended Concordia University, where he met his fiance, who I'm sure he's quite fond of. After graduating from the university, he moved to Marshfield with his fiance and began working part-time with the Wood County Sheriff's Department. At that time, he attended the Law Enforcement Academy at Mid-State Technical College in Wisconsin Rapids and graduated in December of 2021, where he finished with the 3rd highest GPA in his academy class. I know he was striving for number 1, and I think he probably almost got there. So outside of work, Matt enjoys fairly common Wisconsin hobbies such as hunting, fishing, and soccer, which he actually hopes to coach someday. So with that, I had asked Matt to prepare an eloquent speech, which he has politely declined. So I think that seems to be the theme around here, but that's all right. So with that, please help me welcome Matt Klug to the Marshfield Police Department of the city. Thank you.
Welcome, Matt. And we have a second introduction of a new employee, David Ballerstein, a communications specialist, presented by Tom Laux, communications director.
Thank you. We're doing double duty tonight, so we want to make sure we're getting this televised properly. Well, I'm pleased to have David Ballerstein as our new communications specialist. And David has 25 years experience in the field of TV, radio, broadcasting, including 3 years working for Channel 7 in Wausau. David also has professional experience in video editing, graphic design, and graphic production, as well as studio and camera work. And David's responsibilities will be handling our day-to-day operations of Marshfield Broadcasting, which is our public access platforms that are on television and online. He will work to produce video programming with volunteers, community producers, nonprofits here in the community, as well as city staff. And David will be reporting to me. So please welcome David to our staff. Thank you.
Welcome, David. And the third item, which isn't on your agenda, but is Steve Barb has some words to say.
Thank you, Nick. Well, this is the opposite of welcoming new people to our staff. I want to take a couple minutes to just thank Josh and commend him for 12 plus years of service to this community and a job well done. I've been here for the vast majority of that time, about 11 years. I've seen him in action. You won't find a more honest, hardworking person of integrity who comes in here day in, day out and does his job as best he can. He's been a joy to work with. He's been a great part of our leadership team and our overall staff team. And I just want to thank him and wish him all the best as he heads to a private sector job. but I really do just want to recognize him for a really wonderful job well done for the past 12 plus years.
Yes, thank you, Josh. I've gotten the opportunity to work a little closer with Josh sitting in this chair, and I will echo everything that Steve says about his integrity and his hard work. Thank you. I guess we can count that as council president's comments, because that's the only comments I have tonight. Are there any council comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item H, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Any commissions, boards, or committees tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to item I, the consent agenda. You have that before you. Mr. Butke, your motion. Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda from Mr. Butke and a second from Mr. Wagner. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion carries. There are no items removed from the consent agenda, so we'll move to item K, a presentation from Midwest Renewable Energy Association introduced by Steve Bargan, presented by Taylor Ball, Program Manager. Steve.
Thank you. Periodically, we get a group that would like to speak to us on a topic, and we have a presentation. It's not often, but I was approached about 2 months ago, I believe it was, by Taylor Ball of the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. I think I may have gotten that wrong. Hopefully I got close. Anyway, this is a group that works on sustainable projects, and she wanted to talk to the council tonight about what they do, what MREA provides, the service that they offer, and ways that we as a community could look at being more sustainable, opportunities for us in terms of being more environmentally friendly. And Taylor, thank you for joining us, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for this opportunity to join your council meeting virtually. I'm based out of Stevens Point, and although the drive's not far, it is a luxury to be able to meet you all virtually like this. So again, my name is Taylor Ball. I work for the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, also known as the MREA. So before I begin, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, then I did it right. All right, so today I'm going to just be focusing on a program called Go Solar Central Wisconsin. And we would like to invite the city of Marshfield to support our program this year. So my presentation is broken down into the why, the who, the what, the how, and with some time for questions at the end. So we're going to just jump in to the why. Okay, so we like to begin our Grow Solar presentations with our why. So why we're here. So as a root, there are three main problems with the way most people buy electricity. First, there are unpredictable rate increases depending on state policies or utility policies. The price of electricity rises over time in ways that are difficult to plan around. Second, when you're paying a monthly utility bill, you aren't building any equity. In a way, you're currently just renting your electricity from the utility company. Third is the pollution factor. Fossil fuels still produce a majority of our electricity today. So solar solves or mitigates each of these problems. You don't feel the same effects of rate increases if you own a solar system because it's reducing your electricity bill every single month. This is because you're taking ownership of your electricity production and building equity instead of renting that electricity from the utility. The power produced by solar is clean, renewable, offsetting what would have otherwise been produced mostly by fossil fuels. Some communities want to lead their regions in encouraging residents and businesses to go solar. According to the Brookings Institute, slightly less than half of large U.S. cities have established greenhouse gas reduction targets. Some municipalities focus on their own carbon footprint as like an entity, while others include the broader community as well. So that's where we come in. So Grow Solar group buy programs like Grow Solar Central Wisconsin offer a potential avenue for communities to achieve climate and or greenhouse gas targets, and they are worth points towards Soul Smart designation. But before we go any further, let me tell you just a wee bit more about MREA. So the MREA is a nonprofit educational organization based out of central Wisconsin, and our mission is to promote renewable energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable living through education and demonstration. We train renewable energy professionals with our courses on solar photovoltaics or solar PV and small wind. We also offer consumer education through programs like Grow Solar and our annual energy fair in June, for example. The MRA's philosophy is that more solar is better and that education is always first step. We find that our educational outreach is more effective when it's tied to a program like Grow Solar. So whether your community members go solar this year with our program or in the next 5 years, we know that they will gain a better understanding of this technology through this program. Okay, so what is a group buy? What is Grow Solar Central Wisconsin? How does this all work? So our Grow Solar group buy programs are based on the National Renewable Energy Lab Solarize model that was first implemented in Portland in 2009. The group buy program has five key features, So first, our contractor will be selected by a competitive request for proposal process, which is led by the MRA with help of a local advisory committee that is made up of members from the community and our program partner organization. And this allows us to get a high-quality solar installer for a competitive price. Second, we facilitate these programs, but their success is contingent on community-led support, outreach, and involvement. We rely heavily on community members to help get the word out about the program. That means establishing mutually beneficial partnerships with municipalities, organizations, space communities, anyone and everyone to help raise awareness locally. Third, the Group Buy program is a limited time offering, so putting a deadline on a program helps incentivize participation. So the interested parties must sign a contract before the program deadline to get that program pricing. Fourth, the program has a strong customer education component. We offer free public solar power hour presentations that cover the basics of going solar, how our program works, the financial implications of going solar, and then it includes a Q&A session. Delivering all this information up front in a format, helps bring down the solar cost or soft cost of solar installation. So that includes like marketing, customer education, customer acquisition. Additionally, all the information that they get in that hour presentation we provide, that might have taken them a few weeks to get on their own. Additionally, in surveys, we found that community members say that it's very important that the information comes from a third-party nonprofit organization like the MRA, rather than from the for-profit solar installation company. And then lastly, the community outreach and group purchase creates an economy of scale, which helps lower the price for everyone. So everyone wins. So because the home and business owners are getting lower cost solar, the installer gets a steady flow of business, and the community benefits moving closer to its sustainability goals. So just of note, when it comes to working with us, we require no contracts, no city or county resolutions. Furthermore, the MRA funding comes from an administrative fee charged to solar installers. However, the group buy pricing is still lower than what the installer would typically charge on the open market. And then finally, we are to the how. How can your community help? So committing to help promote Grow Solar Central Wisconsin to your residents, to your traditional means of outreach, allowing Grow Solar Central Wisconsin to use your logo on promotional materials, helping us schedule any solar power hours at key locations in your community or with key partners in your community. To get dedicating some amount of staff time to help with the program. We found that, having a municipality staffer championing these programs is a huge plus. And that's it. You can contact me via the email that's provided on the slide, or I can reach out to an email as well to provide more information. Just thank you again for letting me speak to you today. And before I go, we like to joke at the MRA that when there's a huge solar energy spill, it's just called a really nice day. So I just gave you a whole bunch of information. It was so hard to decide what to tell you and what not to tell you. So I did leave a few minutes so folks could ask me questions.
Thank you, Taylor. There's no action to be taken on this item, but if there are any questions, anyone on the council have any questions for Taylor? I don't see any questions, Taylor, so thank you for your time this evening and good luck.
Thank you.
Item L is a 2021 Economic Development Annual Report presentation by Josh Miller, Development Services Director. Josh.
Thank you. I'm just going to get this going here. Go. So it's my pleasure to present our 2021 Annual Economic Development Report. This is a culmination of effort with the Chamber, Main Street, CVB, Nikki from Parks and Rec now, and we all collaborate to put this information together. And it's just really the efforts of the city staff and the council and the local businesses and people in the community that make economic development happen. So it's just kind of a snapshot of what we've done over the last year. And some of it goes back beyond that. You're looking at some assessment values for previous years. And so, but we all included into 1 year package so you can kind of see everything in the same year. So we look at real estate and development, the local regional impact, downtown, loans and grant programs, miscellaneous and special projects. We also touch on workforce, business recruitment, development, and then what's ahead. Some of the completed projects recently this past year were the Burger King remodel, Hampton Inn and Suites new hotel, the new Quick Trip on Central Avenue and Peach, the Masonite Dryer building, the Pet Supplies Plus building, the REM Celebration Center, SC Swiderski Phase 2 of their apartments, Starbucks, and then the boardroom, which is a redeveloped building downtown. These are not all of the projects; these are just some of the highlights. But you can see that we're even some of the retail names that are coming into the community, they're big names. So it's nice to see. Overall building permits, the total number of permits was down slightly, but when you look at the value, the estimated value of the permit, it's more than doubled. And so you see the $34 million to 76, almost $77 million in permit value. That again is an estimate that comes on the permit itself. So we don't dispute that or verify that. That's not the assessed value, but that's the permit dollar amount that goes on our permits. And that's a significant number. And I think part of that is we're getting a more honest reporting number because our permits are not based on the fee as much anymore. It's more based on just a flat fee or a square footage. Then people are going to be a little bit more honest about the numbers that they put on there. They're not worried about a higher value increasing the cost of their permit. But over the years, you can see that the overall number of permits in the last couple of years is still pretty high when comparing the previous 10. Number of housing starts was down a little bit in 2021 compared to 2020. We had 11 new single-family housing starts and 2 new duplexes. We didn't have any multifamily. We did approve a multifamily project on Veterans Parkway as a conditional use, which would be another, I think, 84 units. And if that does come to fruition, then those permits would be taken out later this year. And as we've talked about numerous times, the number of lots available, we actually added lots this year, which is rare, but we did that through the city subdivision project. So we were able to open up some additional single family lots. The average sale price of a home has continued to go up quite a bit. Since 2017, you look at it was just over 147,000. In 2021, we're over 180,000. So that's a pretty big jump in 5 years. I imagine in 2022, it'll continue to go up. The population numbers, these are a little bit of a challenge this year. Going back to 2010, we were a little over 19,000 in population. And then the DOA, we dipped a little bit in the early 2010s. But then the latter half, it started to go up, which made sense. The housing occupancy went down, or went up. The vacancy went down. The number of units we built, multifamily and single family, continued to go up. And so it made sense that the population numbers went up, according to the Department of Administration estimates. And then we get to 2020 with the census, and then it dips back down again to under 19,000. So I think, I think the census numbers are probably on the low side, and we know what happened with the pandemic, and I'm guessing there was probably some challenges collecting data. But then again, in 2021, we see the Department of Administration bump that estimate back up to 19,600. So there's a pretty large discrepancy between the numbers based on what we see anecdotally and the numbers of houses and stuff going in, the workforce needs. I'd have to say I think the population is increasing rather than decreasing. The number of businesses additions and losses, I did have a correction from the report that you got that will be made when we publish it online tomorrow. We showed, I think, 4 businesses lost in 2021. We actually had 3. And so that's just a correction. But to see 17 businesses, new businesses, 13 newer expanded businesses, really great to see that. And only 3 losses. I mean, you don't like to see any losses, but it's on the low end in the last 5 years. So we're continuing to grow in that regard. Unemployment rate, again, historic lows of recent. Actually, the Wood County dipped lower than the state for the first time in a while. Usually Wood County is a little bit above the state average, so we're actually doing better than the state overall. Sales tax, of course, as you see inflation goes up, sales tax goes up naturally, organically, because the costs of goods are more expensive. But overall, every county in the region has continued to see an increase in sales tax revenue. And property value, we've talked about this a little bit between assessed and equalized, and one of the things we'll be hearing later this year a little bit more is a need to do a reval, and I think the council is well aware of that. But you'll start to see this tan line diverge from the blue line, and that's just showing that the equalized is not keeping, or the assessed value is not keeping up with the equalized. Still growing, still increasing, which are great numbers, but ultimately, as they get further apart, that's when you have to start looking at doing a reval. You want those numbers closer together. You're getting tax base based on the actual closer to market value, and right now we're pretty far off from that. Last year we talked a little bit about this dip in net new construction. So it was in 2020 we did see a dip, but those are actually 2019 numbers from the Department of Revenue. But you can start to see in 2021 that trend started going back up. So looking from 17 and doing kind of a straight line to 2021, aside from the dip in 20, we're continuing to see a pretty positive trend. And those that, I think it was 3.5% net new construction was pretty big impact on our budget this past year because that's what we can match the levy with. So that was a great number to come in, and hopefully we'll see it continue to go up in 2022. This graph might seem a little bit disheartening, but we haven't seen the growth in the TIF districts. A lot of our districts, the expenditure period has ended for some of them, so that really reduces what the city can invest. But you see a negative number there, and the reality is we didn't lose $2 million in TIF district value. We closed TID 2, and so you took $5 million off the overall TIF, which if you take that away, we actually had a net increase of about $3 million. But I'm not the best with graphs, so I couldn't figure out how to show that accurately. So looking at the tourism numbers, 2019 was, or I think was it 2018 was our banner year in the city. We had a number of big events, including Farm Tech Days. So that's kind of the bar to get to again. As you look at, 2020 obviously was a tough year for tourism and room tax revenue, but you see in 2021, it's starting to bounce back a little bit in the estimate, quite a bit since from 2020 numbers. So by this time, we don't have all the numbers in, unfortunately. We should get those by May. And the Visit Marshfield does provide us with a report on that. But overall downtown, they did some of the projects that they worked on. They did a destination brand that was created for downtown Marshfield. Continued to support the downtown facade program and the PROW program. The PROW, which allows some outdoor seating in the public right of way or signage, temporary signage. They did, let's see here, what else? They did other holiday events such as Trick or Treat came back this year. They also did a community survey, which they had 444 responses. They did that towards the end of the year. That was an effort to help with their strategic plan. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I think, I don't know if it's available on the website, but if you want a copy of it, let me know. It's really, folks from the state, WEDC, helped with that plan, but they did a really nice job with their strategic plan, but that survey was integral in that. Overall, the number of new businesses, 7 businesses were added to the downtown, 7 interior remodels. Two of the 3 businesses that closed were in the downtown. As far as the Wenzel Family Plaza, they really focused on some small group settings. We're still dealing with some social distancing, but that was one of the focus things that they learned through COVID was focusing on small group settings. Continue to do wellness events like yoga in the plaza. Increase in fountain usage, unfortunately, until the 4th of July when we had a mechanical issue, and there was a gap between that and when the aquatic center opened. So it was warm at that time of year. It was in July. So, but it should be back up and running again this year. I think they got the parts ready for that. And then they had Make Music Day, which was a national event to promote music in the communities. Also, the Hub City Concert Series kicked off in June. And Wenzel Plaza continues to be a focal point in the downtown for events such as Hub City Days and Dairy Fest. I think this is the 3rd year of Oktoberfest or 4th year of Oktoberfest being held there. And then they continue to have the holiday events and then the ice skating rink in Wenzel Family Plaza. Citywide is the Central Wisconsin Economic Development Fund, which is kind of a gap financing program for businesses that want to get started in this region. And it's a multi-county region. And it now matches our North Central Wisconsin Regional Plan Commission area. And you can see the number of projects throughout the last 5 years, or since 2015, and the dollar amount that is lent out. And so that's exciting to see that businesses are taking advantage of that. And it's not meant to compete with banks. It's really just it's a gap financing tool that I think they've got a loan committee now, and they're really becoming more efficient in their reviews of projects. So cut off my total here at the Zoom meeting, but they got the facade program is still going strong, and I think we'll have a lot more applications for it this year. In 2021, we had 2 projects that got approved, and they're still they won't not slated for completion until this year, but we anticipate that those will continue. But that's again a great program for the community. Some projects that we worked on from an economic development standpoint, I always kind of attribute it to the Economic Development Board, but it's obviously the council and many others that are involved in this, as well as many staff. But the sewer service area plan was adopted in 2021. We did adopt an economic development strategic plan, a capital improvement program. I did a TIF overview that we do every year. Made our final MRI payment. Daniel's Addition City Subdivision was a major project and a really good one to get going. A couple of TID creations, TID 12 and TID 13, also TID 7 amendment. And those will be positioned the city well for future industrial development and residential. And yeah, and then the last one was really the acquiring the industrial land, which we're still working on, but we anticipate that being done in April. As far as workforce goes, this is mostly Mackey led. They had 94 youth apprenticeship enrollees for 45 active employers. A couple of videos for HR for schools' do's and don'ts for writing and building a resume. And we know it's a big challenge to get quality workers. And so that's a valuable asset or skill set for the students to have. And then they opened their job board last year, I think, or in 2020. They had 246 job postings with 26,000 views. So getting a lot of activity there. And again, they continue their ongoing efforts every year. Leadership Marshfield program, the Crystal Apple Awards, Business After 5, Dairy Fest, really touch a lot of different components throughout the community. Looking ahead, the Economic Development Board has asked the staff to do an update every quarter about how things are going on the strategic plan, keeping staff in check and making sure that things are getting done. Our first report was really pretty exciting to see all the things that we're working on. West 2nd Street corridor redevelopment plan, we had a meeting today with the consultants. Really excited about the opportunities for that area, and continue to focus on housing, redevelopment, and industrial expansion. The local chamber looking at continuing with the reality store, cruising for careers business tours, Career Expo. A new website was launched in January of this year. And again, they'll continue to help with the promotion of the industrial land. And any grant programs, they've always been really good about providing assistance. Same with Main Street. These Badger Bounce Back programs, we get a lot of inquiries of how do I qualify? How am I eligible? And you know, they need a support letter often, and they step up to do those things. Touched on the West 2nd Street redevelopment plan that is due to be done in July of this year, and that looks to be on target. We anticipate acquiring the industrial land for TID 12 by April, hopefully. And then TID 13, we're looking to do a mixed-use TIF, or we have a mixed-use TIF created, looking to do a residential subdivision, and then captures future industrial growth in that area and provide assistance when needed. So with that, it's been a good year, I think, overall for 2021. And I think we should be proud of the work that's been done. And we're continuing to see, and a lot of these projects aren't capturing what's going on right now and things that are coming. We just basically touched on the things that were completed in 2021. So be happy to address any questions.
Anyone have any questions for John? I don't see, well, we do have Mr. Fisher.
I don't have a question, but I do want to make a comment. I serve on the Economic Development Board, and Josh has just done a phenomenal job, in my opinion, being the staff liaison for that. So I just want to give credit where credit's due, because as I was looking at this annual report last week, Thursday, and then again today, much of it is because of his. I just wanted to highlight that, Josh. Thank you.
Mr. Butke.
Yeah, I was on the Economic Development Board as well. Before the meeting, I told Josh he really did a good job with the 2nd Street corridor. We've been pushing for that for a while. Excuse me. And he really took a hold of it, and with other people involved, but it was because of Josh's pushing. So thank you, Josh.
Yeah, I appreciate all the nice words tonight, and from Steve and Nick earlier. It's very touching, and obviously it's a team effort. We have a great staff here. I know it's getting smaller. Unfortunately, we have less staff than we used to, but really a great team. I know Dan and Tom and his team. Obviously, the city subdivision wouldn't have happened without their quick work, and same with the 2nd Street corridor. I think that the vision helped become more clear with the potential to move the city garage. And without that piece of it, we'd still be kind of wondering what we could do. So I appreciate it, but it's a huge effort, and, it's very humbling, but thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions for John?
I don't know how to fix this.
Here we go. Item M is a presentation on the staff's recommended uses of our ARPA funding, presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works.
All right, thank you. I'm glad you don't have to look at my face on that big screen up there. So I think we've talked about the ARPA funding in the past, and you might remember that the city will receive just over $1.9 million in funding from that program. We actually received half of it in 2021, and the other half is set to come in 2022. Initially, when the guidance first came out about how the funds could be used, there were several categories identified and areas that money could be spent. And Ron at that time cautioned, let's hold back on how we want to spend this money till we see how all the rules evolve on it. And that was a wise recommendation from him, because over time the instructions have eased up a little bit and become more flexible. So initially, the most flexible category of spending was in the category called replacement of lost revenue, which was really wide open for most any type of government spending. But there was a complicated formula on how to determine what your lost revenue might be. Over time, they realized that was complicated for municipalities, and so they established a $10 million a revenue loss allowance. So anybody who was to get less than $10 million would be able to use that funding in the most flexible category of replacing lost revenue. So in our case, then that whole $1.9 million can be used for essentially almost any government service There are some limited restrictions, but typically any traditional service provided by the government could be eligible for funding. The funding must be allocated by the end of 2024, so we don't have to make decisions on all of the funding now, and it has to be spent by the end of 2026, so there is time to work it into future years as well. So I think, as I mentioned back in December, when we talked a little bit about CIP, that staff has been working on a list of possible projects, and I think all the department heads you see in this room have been part of that discussion, trying to identify what priorities there might be. And in a minute, I'd like to go over that list with you. You'll find that some of these aren't glamorous or high-profile projects, but they're things that have been on a list for a while that just have not been gotten to the finish line or gotten funded, that we think this might be an opportunity to get some of those things done. You'll see the list covers a wide variety of services and departments. It's broken down by year. We have some identified for use already in 2022. Any of those projects that you'd like to approve would require budget resolution when the time comes. That can either be done individually or in groups as those projects are ready to move forward. And then in future years, those projects we would like to add to the annual CIP process, keep them in that 5-year plan, and then they would be approved as budgets are approved in future years. So I'd like to review that list with the council. We have department heads here who are available to answer questions that might come up. But before I go through the list, is there any questions in general on the ARPA funding and what we've tried to accomplish here to date?
Don't see any, Dan.
There's one.
And Mr. Wagner.
I see that at the end of this period, at the end of 2025, you're going to have 251,332 in reserve for future. Could that money could also be used for economic development now? Isn't that correct?
Sure.
So can we sort of earmark it for? Well, we can talk about this when we bring it up for a final vote on later in March. But I would think that that chunk of money might be available to give a bootstrap to some of the programs we've got going too. And one other question, $100,000 for a library generator replacement in 2023. Is that pushing it? I mean, I know at the county, when anything that had to do with electrical or HVAC, we established that as like a priority to throw the money at first because it was an easy thing to do.
Right.
Do we have to, is it taking a risk by putting it off to 2023?
Because I can defer to Jill on that. She's shaking her head no. But there might be some delivery time questions on getting equipment like that right now. So if maybe we need to start the process now, but not expect to have it.
I don't know if there's something we could swap out to do that ordering process. But
well, I'll go through the projects and then we can talk about priorities. And there's definitely flexibility built into this list. If we see things that should be shuffled around, this is a staff recommendation. Of course, there's room for adjustment. So.
And the only thing you forgot was Merry Christmas. So that's it.
Okay, with that, then maybe I'll go through the list, and if there's questions along the way, I can try to answer those or call on my peers here to help me get through those. So the first one on the list, and these are not in any particular priority order, but Josh mentioned the need for a citywide evaluation. We've targeted that on the list. The estimate here is really kind of a guesstimate, for lack of a better term, because we haven't solicited any proposals on this work yet. But as Josh mentioned, our assessment ratio has dropped now below 90% for the third year in a row. And we'll need to do something sooner rather than later on that one. We thought this would be an opportunity to fund that in 2022. The next one is on the round barn windows. You've heard that Justin and his team has received a tourism grant for $140,000. Our best estimate on that project is around 150. We think there's a little gap to fill to get that project completed, so we're suggesting that money from the ARPA fund be used for that. We've talked about the library. No, this is not the generator. This is the computer equipment. Jill had asked for some equipment for PCs, servers, and switches for library staff and patrons. She originally asked for it in 2022 budget. That was removed to balance that budget, so we're suggesting that be added back into 2022. The next two are public works projects. We have the East 17th Street project that is currently out for bid. I think I reported to the Board of Public Works earlier that we've added some improvements on the Fair Association property, which were not originally budgeted for. And we expect some inflationary increases that were not budgeted for either. So that we expect a gap in that funding. We're estimating about $250,000 now. Those bids open tomorrow, actually. So by next Monday, we hope to bring a recommendation back to the Board of Public Works to award that bid, and we'll know in more detail if that 250,000 was a good estimate or not. Similarly, on our 2022 asphalt paving program, we anticipate increase over last year. I think I reported to the board in December that our vendor mentioned you could expect 15 to 20% increase in asphalt costs from last fall or from last season. So we've updated our cost estimate and think we might be in the neighborhood of $200,000 short on that if we wanted to fund all our projects. Now, we also have the option of not doing all the projects that were on the list and delaying something to a future year. So that'll be a recommendation that will come to the Board of Public Works when those bids are open. And those are due on Friday of this week. I don't think we'll have that ready for the board agenda next Monday, but for the first meeting in April, the board will have a recommendation on awarding of the asphalt paving program. The next one on the list is the communications project. Tom is suggesting he could use a few more cameras in this room for filming the meetings, and then also some audio equipment for the video work that's being done in the field to improve the quality of video, or of audio in those recordings. There are a couple of IT projects here that Eng has suggested. One would be to improve wireless access, internet access in City Hall and the 2nd Street Community Center with updated switches and wireless access points. I believe that's also access for the public. Is that correct? Yeah, so it helps with access for those in the building to access the internet. Then along with that, more access to the internet implies the need for higher security in some cases. So this is a second project there is to update the city's firewall, which improves our security system-wide. So those projects would be things we'd propose for 2022, totaling about $864,000. Any questions on those? Okay, then in 2023, we have another list of projects. Deb has reported that Wood County is planning to update their voting machines, and we'll need to purchase 3 new ones. Not a big ticket item, but certainly not budgeted for. So that $11,000 would purchase new voting machines in 2023. Josh has mentioned the Affordable Housing Program, which is an initiative by EDB. $100,000 would be targeted toward that. Now, this is not the primary funding source. The primary funding source will come as we close TIF districts in future years, but this would be some seed money to get that program started in 2023 and then be in good position to use the TIF dollars that would be coming toward it in future years. The library generator project we talked about as a 2023 project. The next one is the water main project on Lincoln Avenue from Ive Street to the north. This is one that's been in and out of the CIP. It would serve an area that's currently developed but does not have city water available to it, as well as serving some additional newly developed areas on the west side of Lincoln Avenue up toward the viaduct there. So we're suggesting up to $335,000 be used for that water main project. The project has a total estimate, though, of $535,000, so it would require some long-term debt to complete the full funding for that project. The next one is a HVAC project in the 2nd Street Community Center to replace those boilers, which are original to the previous library. They've gotten a lot of mileage out of those boilers, but it's time. In fact, Justin mentioned the other day that they're having trouble with one now. Well, there's only one, but so they're having trouble with it now. So he's going to ask that might be moved up to 2022. Similarly, in the fire station, we have some boilers there which aren't nearly as old, but also giving us trouble. Those were the latest and greatest, the high efficiency, small footprint boilers that were installed at that time, and they are now no longer made and struggling to keep those going. So Pete's looking for some new boilers at the fire station. And then Tom has another communications component here, which would be a public participation platform called Engagement HQ. Don't know how it works, but it's an easy way for residents to participate in local decision-making through this social media platform. See your question.
Mr. Bucky.
Thank you. Dan, I know I've asked this before and I don't remember the answer, but when we have to pay for water line, I guess I don't understand that. That would be like asking us to pay for the electric lines. Why is not the utility having to pay for the water line? It must be a law or.
Yeah, my understanding of the PSC rules is the developer, whoever's asking for the extension, pays for the extension versus the ratepayers paying for the extension. So that's pretty common. The Daniels subdivision, city paid for those, the water main installation in that subdivision as well.
And we don't, the city doesn't get the money back from that. That would seem, I could see us paying for it, but as part of the rates to get that money back, it would be just something that makes sense to me to do. I mean, like I said, why not the electric lines? Why are we paying for those, you know? And I got the wrong person here. I thank you for your response.
I can try to follow up a little bit more on the distinctions there.
Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, thank you. And following up on Tom's a little bit, just that Lincoln Avenue extension from Ives to McMillan, isn't that the area that we annexed that in at one time? And we were planning on CIP for a long time to put that's the area that was annexed in, isn't it?
Well, the area, I mean, I'm not sure how long it's been annexed into the city, but we're talking about the east side of McMillan, just south of the Viaduct Nelson Marathon area, is an area of city development that is on private wells yet. And that's been that way since.
And this will take care of that.
This would serve those areas, yeah.
Hallelujah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for Dan? Good more, Dan? Oh, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Council President. I got a couple questions on this section. How did we come to the amount of 100,000 for affordable housing?
Just a round number, yeah.
Okay.
Nothing more than that, yeah.
And do we have any idea what we would use that for? I mean, where would that 100,000 go?
Josh will bail me out here.
Yeah, it was just kind of a round number for seed money to get started in 2023, knowing that in an initial year, it might take a little while to get something going. But a program like that, we talked about it at the EDB level about maybe helping out with some exterior improvements or siding or things like that. That would be kind of small projects, but would help people like the low to moderate income, probably low affordable housing type people to do projects like that to improve their home.
Do we have any program guidelines in place of what we're looking for? And if we don't, what's that going to look like?
Yeah, great question. And we don't at the moment, but the charge of our department is to develop an affordable housing program by mid-year this year. And we hope to, by the time we budget for it, we would have a program that's at least been reviewed by EDB and approved by EDB and council, of course. But it's basically, there's other programs in the state that we can use as a model. And you take, like what Dan had said, is in future years, it would be funded by TIF. And so there's certain guidelines that we would have to follow to make sure that it serves affordable housing. At least 75% of the money can go towards affordable housing. The other 25% can help improve the housing stock of the community. But the intent would be, by the time this is approved in budget for 2023, you all would be aware of what the program would entail, and you could earmark it for certain parts of that program.
Okay, thank you. And then another item on this list is the 52,000 new boiler for the fire station. Newer building, so can you give me an explanation as to why the boiler's already out?
Really wish I could. We were having our boilers cleaned at the end of last year, and I was made aware that 3 out of the 4 boilers were only functioning. The one, pretty much, it's done. They're using parts from that boiler to actually make the other 3 work. And like Dan had mentioned, that when we built the station in 2010, these were a smaller footprint, high efficiency type boilers. They're no longer made. They're out of business.
Yeah, and that's what and I know this isn't your fault, but that's what drives me crazy.
Right.
Build a new building 12 years later. I see that the boiler is, not being serviced, and I'm going, that just gets under my skin. And I know that's not your fault in the fire departments or the cities, but it's frustrating. So thank you for the
Frustrating to me too.
Any other questions for Dan or any of the other staff members present?
Yeah, just a few more to mention here then, but I would like to go back to a question Alderman Wagner asked about the Lincoln and Nelson Marathon area. The project that's on your list in front of you would get water main up Lincoln Avenue to the viaduct. There would be a second project that would get water main looped through that neighborhood, and that would be in a future year. So this would be the start of it, but there'd be an add-on project to actually serve that neighborhood.
May I respond?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. There is another area we just recently annexed in, I think in 2015, and that's down on the south end of town. Do we have that water and sewer lines to be put in there? In CIP anywhere?
We do not, but you're right. There are some on South Central Avenue in that area that are in the city limits, but do not have access to city sewer and water. That's correct.
Well, they got the benefit of being taxed by us, but they didn't get many of the other benefits that went with it. So
that is true. They are in the city paying taxes. Typically, sewer and water are not funded by taxes. Those are funded by user fees. So if you're not a user, you don't pay.
But they still didn't get the services. Is my point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll continue on the list then. In 2025, we have penciled in an airport project. The airport committee has been working hard to be in position for the bill funding, BIL, coming from the federal government, and there is a fair amount available for airports. The high priority for our airport is runway reconstruction and extension. We're thinking that can happen in 2025. We're currently under a master planning process that will be done by the end of 2022, and that'll lay out the capital projects for the next few years, with the airport runway improvements being the primary one. This $125,000 would cover the local share of that, as our estimates would indicate today. And then the final project on the list there, highlighted in yellow, is the undistributed amount. We thought it would be prudent not to tie up all the funds at this point because we don't have to until the end of 2024. So if something would come up later this year, 2023, we'd have a little pool of money there that could be used for another high priority project that we don't know of yet. So that's how the 1.9 million would be allocated on the staff's proposal. You'll see in the bottom of the list there are a few other projects that were considered but not within the recommended list. Two of those relate to lead water service replacements, and while there are some grant funds available for residential lead service replacements, they're not available for commercial or other non-residential properties. So one of these, the first project would help fund non-residential property lead service replacements. Now, the reason we chose not to put it in our first list of projects is that there's lots of other infrastructure money that is coming down the line here that may be suited to cover this. We just don't know yet. So we wanted to wait and see how the other infrastructure money that's becoming available would fit in. And then the second project has to do with the cost of the customer curb stop. That's the shutoff that's out by the street for each residential or each property. And sometimes those are missing or inoperable, and when they have to be replaced, that is a property owner cost. This would be a way to help with that cost share. There's really only $250 each, but this would help offset that cost. I see a couple questions of
Mr. Butke.
Thank you. This is actually for Pete, if you could come up. I'm just questioning because my background's been in maintenance. Is there a maintenance? Do you have a firm for the maintenance of like boilers and so on and so forth? And again, like Mr. Fisher said, it's not your fault. I'm blaming you. I do know boilers, the flues have to be cleaned out. They should do that annually, and it's important, and it's certainly not for your guys, but firms. Correct. Is there a firm, Pete? That,
yes, we do. We have an annual.
Was it always that way, or
no,
that's what I thought? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Council President. I got a few questions. One, and I apologize, I forgot to ask this under the 2022, but I thought I heard you say that on the first thing with the citywide reevaluation that you're projecting it's going to cost 250, but you don't know for sure. Is that correct?
That's correct. I see Steve walking up, so I'll let him.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. You remember when Grota was here, we talked about some alternatives, and it goes from like a gold to a silver to a bronze kind of thing, if you can picture. The highest dollar value one, which is almost $500,000, would be have us try to get into every single home in the city. That was the typical reval procedure in the past. State law has now said that homeowners don't need to allow you entrance to the house, and that what that's showing is that maybe they're lucky to get 30% of the homes, checked out. So there's that, and then coming on down the list, you get to more of a statistical reval toward the bottom, which does not involve you getting in the homes. It involves exterior reviews and doing the best job you can of assessing the value of the homes that way. But you have statistical information to compare, two stories and ranches and everything else is how they've appreciated. So there really honestly is a myriad of ranges from, like I said, upwards of near $500,000 to considerably less than that. $250,000 is a placeholder. I think it will most likely be less than that, but we didn't know what to assign it at this point.
Okay, so, and that's what I was hoping you were going to hit on. So you don't believe it's going to exceed?
No, no, it may well not reach that if we go more toward the statistical side, but we haven't made a decision yet. Obviously, you're going to have this brought to your attention here, hopefully sometime fairly soon, as to how to move forward. But the higher value costs are tied into trying to get into all the homes, and that's simply an unlikely scenario.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation. I mean, I was just concerned when I saw this and heard that a projection. I want to make sure that we're not going to exceed that. I want to make sure that this is realistic, or we're giving ourselves somewhat of a buffer to make sure.
Yeah, we faced a little bit of what Dan was talking about with the inflation effects on street projects and whatnot in a different way. It's not a material cost, but certainly the cost of services is likely to increase. But I feel good about $250,000 as a max value that we're putting into this plan.
Okay, and then I have two more questions. The next question is on the last thing for the future, 251,332. I mean, you have that as just kind of reserved for future. You don't have any ideas for that, or could some of these projects that were not considered fall under that?
Sure, they certainly could. I can come up with some more too if
Well, and that wasn't necessarily what I was asking, but it's one of those things where I do agree with, I think it was Alderman Wagner earlier said, maybe using this for economic development, or at least having maybe a secondary list of possible projects that this could be used for, I think would be wise. I think having this as a contingency fund is what I'm seeing this as, is also wise. But if there's no emergency between now and 2025, let's get ahead of it and maybe have at least something in writing, a proposed plan of how this could be spent. I'm big into economic development because ideally it creates bigger tax base. I think that's something we need to be looking at. But I think we need to take a harder look at this amount of money and how we might be able to spend it. The next question I have is, unless I'm missing it, I don't see the police department asking for anything. So just wondering why the police department isn't on the list. Just odd to me.
they're completely satisfied.
I probably don't have a very stellar answer for you, but like Dan said, we could certainly add things. I'll take my best shot to say that with the recent study of our building and the possibility of an addition or a new build at some point in the future, a lot of those structural things, when we have a roof, we have a new control system, have kind of been pushed down the line on the CIP. That would be my best explanation as far as we didn't come forward with that right now. So.
All right, it was just something I noticed. I was curious.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you again, sir. We've been tracking these funds down at county quite a bit, and we're we're coming up with, we're going through somewhat of the same process. We found out, I think there's a second pot of money out there that we'll have to apply for, and that is the infrastructure bill. And that does have a special pool of money. Well, it's got some for airports, which I'm drooling over. But the other part of it is there is some money for lead pipe replacement in that. So I don't know who we've got on staff that would be looking at that, but maybe we could replace some of this stuff with infrastructure money, then pick somebody else's pocket instead of this ARPA pocket, and then they'll give us more money to use on other things. So that's all I wanted to make sure that we're looking at the other grant sources too. Oh, by the way, economic development's in there too, so.
Yeah, you're right. There's a variety of funding options coming down, and trying to get a grasp of all that is kind of a challenge, but we're trying to absorb what we can as more information becomes available. There's just a couple more projects on the bottom of the list that I would bring to your attention that are not being recommended at this point, but certainly could be as priorities evolve over the next year or two. And those are communications related projects that Tom has suggested. One of them is a local low power FM radio station. The Communications Committee has suggested this, I believe, and this is something other communities do to broadcast meetings and so forth and reach a population that maybe doesn't have cable TV or that kind of thing. And the next one is similar in that a broadcast antenna for distributing live video. This one maybe is a little less common, but it would be an antenna to broadcast our meetings through to those folks who don't have cable TV and reach those audiences that only use TV antennas, which maybe are getting fewer these days. These probably need a little more study on what the true cost of these would be, so they'd be a little longer term, but both these are initiatives that the Communications Committee has discussed. And then finally, we have a park in the northeast corner or quadrant of the city, Connor Park, which is essentially undeveloped at this point. Justin has a long-range plan of developing some gravel surface trails in that park, a $50,000 item or so, which is on our list. We talked about it, but it didn't rise to the level of the recommended list. Certainly could be with some of the underspirited funds if the council feels that's important. But anyway, that was our list of projects, and happy to take any more questions. Again, no action tonight. Even if you have questions after the meeting next week, suggestions, feel free to let me know. Can certainly fine tune this list further. It doesn't all have to be approved at once. So the 2022 projects would be the ones we'd be looking for your consideration of initially, and then the others would be added to a CIP for discussion as that document comes forward.
Thank you, Dan. When I looked at the list, I thought the committee did a fine job of spreading it out through the different departments in the city and addressing some of the needs that we're going to have shortfalls on. Good job.
Thank you.
Item N is a request to approve budget resolution number 02-2022, transferring $404,215 within the taxi system fund to properly reallocate taxi fares as revenues, presented by Jennifer Selensky, Finance Director.
Thank you. The City of Marshfield provides a shared ride service, which is operated by Running, Inc. Much of the cost of the program is covered by federal grants, state grants, rider fares, and agency fees. The federal grant pays roughly 50% of the actual cost as reported quarterly, which comes from Running and a monthly invoice minus the rider shares. Under the contract with Running, they collect the revenue, the city's revenues on our behalf, and as a convenience, they don't pay us, they just subtract it from the amount that they charge for the actual service. During the preparation of the annual report for the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, I observed that the city is not correctly reporting those rider fares as revenue, but has been recording them as a reduction of the total cost of the program as an expense. This has been occurring in 2021 and for years prior. Generally accepted accounting principles require that we report revenues and expenditures individually. With that, the taxi system fund revenues and expenditures were each incorrectly budgeted for 2022. The addition of revenue and expense as recommended below doesn't change the bottom line. It's just merely moving it out from expense and putting it as revenue. So both revenues and expenses increase by the same amount. The city's, for 2022, the city is contracted with Running Inc. and the maximum amount of that contract is $1,079,215. The current budget for taxi services is $675,000, which is $404,215 less than the anticipated expenditures. Likewise, the city's budget for taxi fares is zero, or $404,215 less than its anticipated revenues. So my recommendation would be to adjust the budget to properly reflect the amount of revenues and expenses. Are there any questions?
First, we'll entertain Mr. Witzel's motion.
To approve.
Okay, and second by Mr. Fisher. Mr. Butke.
Thank you. So Jennifer, a couple reasons for doing this. I think we're going to do it the right way.
Correct.
And second of all, you're going to be able to track it better as well. Is that correct?
It's more transparent. It properly reflects revenues and expenses.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, the motion is to approve budget resolution number 02-2022. Please vote. And that motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, item O is a request to approve budget resolution number 03-2022, increasing both the revenue and expense accounts within the Parks and Recreation capital outlay budget by $140,000, related to grant funds received to replace the round barn windows at the Central Wisconsin State Fairgrounds, presented by Justin Casperson, Parks and Recreation Director. Go ahead, Justin.
Good evening, everyone. Before I get started, I want to notice that Josh did make a change in his staff apparel requirement, that they'll have uniforms going forward with a maroon short shirt and tie. So thank you, Josh, for administering that before you leave. Of course, I got to pick on Josh because he's not going to be along for very long. Wait, you just wait, Deb. I'll be picking on you later. Yes, Governor Evers announced a $21 million grant opportunity through the Tourism Capital Investment Grant. We applied for it late last year. We received $140,000 to be used to replace the round barn window. I think most of you are familiar with the round barn, and the windows have been deteriorating and rotting for quite a few years. And we've been struggling to identify a funding source. So now we've identified a funding source, and we're in the midst of getting bids for that and getting the work done before the fair this year. So this budget resolution is to allocate those funds properly.
A motion by Mr. Fisher.
Motion to approve the budget resolution.
And a second by Mr. Witzel. Are there any questions or comments for Justin? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion carries. Item P is a request to approve budget resolution number 4-2022, increasing general fund budgets as follows. Oak Avenue Community Center by $12,500, Second Street Community Center by $4,353, and Cemetery by $3,500 related to grant funds received for various parks and recreation projects, presented by Justin Casper.
Thank you. In September of last year, the league announced a grant opportunity for members. Our community received $20,353, which is currently being held in the fund balance. This resolution would then allocate the proper funds to the proper accounts to address some needs in our department. We looked at ways to mostly to energy saving, or example would be Oak Avenue LED lights. We have halogen lights there we're replacing with LEDs, as well as replacing the furnace at the cemetery, which is currently not really working well, and we're spending a lot of money on maintenance and maintaining it. So these projects would be done this year and done pretty quickly. So this is the budget resolution for those projects.
Okay, motion, Mr. Witzel.
To approve.
Great. And a second by Mr. Varsho. Are there any comments or questions on this budget budget resolution? Okay, the motion is to approve budget resolution 4-2022. Please vote. And that motion carries. Item Q is a second reading of ordinance number 1469, annexation of land south of the intersection of 1500 and 1502 West McMillan Street and Veterans Parkway frontage road, and setting CMU as the rezoning classification, presented by Stephen Wiley, city planner. Stephen.
Thank you. So this item, you will recall, came before you at the last meeting 2 weeks ago. It was recommended for approval at the February 15th Plan Commission meeting. It is 2 parcels, direct annexation of those parcels from the town of McMillan. We've been working with the current property owners and the developer that is interested in acquiring these parcels to put up a commercial development in the near future. Utilities already exist on the in the vicinity of these parcels, so they would just have to be connected at the time of development. As mentioned in the title, there is a request to zone this CMU, community mixed use. That would be consistent with the surrounding zoning and the future land use recommendation of commercial for that area. And with that, we are recommending approval of this ordinance.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Buckey.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and a second by Mr. Witzel. I will comment that this is in my district. I did receive one citizen comment concerning this. They did not have a problem with the annexation, but did have some questions about the use of the property, and we will bring that up at the appropriate time. But as far as the annexation, that's not a problem with the citizen. Any other comments? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion carries. Item R is a second reading of ordinance number 1470, rezoning property at 1216 North Lincoln Avenue from RH35 rural holding to SR3 single family residential, presented by Stephen Wiley.
Thanks. So this one also was before you 2 weeks ago, and this is a zone change request, RH35 to SR3 single family residential. And the current owner would be interested in potentially subdividing and selling a significant portion of this property for potential redevelopment or potential development, I should say, as potentially like a single family subdivision. And to do that, we figured the easiest way to do it would be to zone change the parcel. Currently, it is not served by city water, as you will recall, I mentioned in the last meeting. Any development that would occur there would be contingent on the water main project of North Lincoln Avenue moving forward. And I believe that project is included in the list of ARPA projects. So this zone change would just be the first step in allowing potential development to occur down the road. A single family subdivision would be consistent with the comprehensive plan recommendation for the area. The zoning proposed, single family residential, would be consistent with the surrounding zoning also. So with that, we are recommending approval of this zone change request.
Mr. Witzel, your motion.
Move to approve.
And a second by Mr. Fire. Any comments or questions on this ordinance? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries. Item S is a second reading of ordinance number 1471. General Development Plan Amendment for the Prairie Run Subdivision to allow changes to previously approved residential land use mix and lot configuration, again presented by Stephen Wiley.
So this item concerns the Prairie Run subdivision, and the developer, as I mentioned before, has expressed interest in continuing build out of the subdivision. And to do so based on changing market conditions, they wanted to obtain approval through the General Development Plan amendment process to change the land use mix from what was proposed before. This went through Plan Commission last month. And as you recall, there is quite a history to, this goes back a ways, Prairie Run does. And I don't have to go into detail into all of that now, as I presented that before, but we did examine this, Plan Commission examined it, and they were supportive of the proposed changes. Most of it would be just reduction in densities. So going from, for example, duplexes to single family, triplexes to duplexes, and just a slight reduction in density from what was originally proposed. This too is consistent with the recommendation as laid out in the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. So the commercial and transitional mixed use or transition mixed use would be maintained at the southern end of the subdivision, and then low, medium density residential for most of the northern part of the subdivision, which is the bulk of the area concerned there. The land use mix and the lot configurations were really the areas that were focused on as part of this GDP amendment. Any architectural or building elevation changes or landscaping and setbacks, any of that stuff would be dealt with in the specific implementation plan process, which would be the next step in the process, along with the formal plat review and approval. Parkland dedication, as I mentioned before, a little over an acre is proposed for dedication as green space or park space. Parks, both staff and the committee reviewed and are supportive of that dedication as proposed. And so with that, we are supportive and recommend approval of this one as well. And it'll allow the developer to come back with an SIP for approval in the future.
Okay, Mr. Butke, you have the motion.
Motion to approve.
Okay, the second from Mr. Witzel, comment from Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, thank you. It strikes me, we've been through a lot of changes with Prairie Run over the years. And it strikes me as there was at one time a homeowners association. Is that still in existence? And have they given you any input on this as to whether or not they approve it or reject it?
It is still in existence, and the developer did note that the homeowners association did review these changes at previous meetings, and they were supportive. So, yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? And the motion is to approve ordinance number 1471. Please vote. And that motion carries. Item T, I don't know if we want to talk about this. It's a request to begin the process of refilling the vacant city clerk position, presented by Steve Bard.
Thank you. When I was up here earlier in the evening, I got a chance to give some kudos and commendation to Josh on the great job he's done here the past 12 years. And I want to do the same right now for Deb. I realize this is not her last meeting, but Deb has just done an absolutely outstanding job for 29 years, 23 of those years here as city clerk. And I think you've seen her great work. Many of you have been here on the council for a while and you know all that she does. Certainly elections, licenses, and so many other things, and being at these meetings. I definitely appreciate her, and they're going to be big shoes to fill, as it will be with Josh. So anyway, I want to thank the council for allowing us to go forward to this meeting instead of waiting till the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting next week, so we can begin the process of refilling what will be the vacant city clerk position. Deb has indicated that her last working day will be April 28th, so we do have some time here, but we want to get out there and get it posted. We'll likely be taking applications for roughly 4 weeks, and there's a process we go through. You know, you can imagine with the interviews and ultimately some candidate who is selected giving time to their current employer before coming here. So we may be into early June, potentially before we have somebody on board. We'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But as I mentioned, the city clerk position is a vital one for the city for a variety of reasons, never more evident than in recent years when we've had, I think, 5 elections, 2 years ago, I believe it was, and all that has to be done with that, but along with the many functions of the clerk's office that she and her staff do so well. So with that in mind, I would like to ask for your approval to begin the refilling process for what will be the vacant city clerk position as of late April.
Mr. Witzel, your motion.
Move to approve.
And a second by Mr. Wagner. And I'll just add to that I may look like I know what I'm doing up here, but really if Deb's not sitting there, I don't really know where these meetings would go. Is there any comments or questions? Seeing none, please vote. And that motion carried. Item U is to adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.85, paragraph 1E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons are involved, specifically the development agreement for project located within TIF District 13, and a closed session under Wisconsin statutes number 19.85, paragraph 1F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations. And 19.85, paragraph 1G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, specifically to review the municipal court record, procedure, and protocol for the collection and allocation of forfeiture. I'm looking for a motion to go into closed session. Motion for Mr. Fisher, a second by Mr. Witzel. Please vote. So we have to do a roll call vote. Oh, we can vote on the machine. There we go. And that motion carries. We're in closed session.